can't find 50, and he goes down 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. And we finally see at the end God lets Lot and his family leave, and he destroys the city, but they're told not to look back. We see Lot's wife looks back. She's turned into a pillar of salt. But in this account here, we see that Abraham, he was concerned for the souls of those people living there in Sodom. And we should be thinking of other people's souls as well, and always trying to help them come to know Jesus. All right, next point. Flip back over to chapter 14, beginning with verse 18. Abraham showed others the power of God through his life. This is when Abraham figures out he's in a little bit of trouble. He needs to get out, so Abraham goes to the rescue. Beginning with verse 18, it says, Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me. Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. So we see Lot, he had fallen, I guess, kind of into the temptations of the world. He was living in this wicked city, and Abraham goes, he goes for him to try to help him out. He gets his army together. They eventually bring Lot back, and through this event, God's power, he defeated a lot of people with a few. We see that God's power through, obviously the kings here, they knew something was extraordinary going on, because normally it shouldn't happen. We see Melchizedek, he brings out bread and wine to celebrate, saying this truly is God. And God was with Abraham at this time. And then up towards the end there, we see that Abraham makes sure that the king of Sodom knows that God is getting the glory, not him. It wasn't his doing, but that God was with him during this. The next point is Abraham trusted and believed God. Now there's many places we can look throughout the account of Abraham to see this. Always go back to chapter 12, because I think that's a huge leap of faith there, to just up and leave, not knowing where you're going or what you're doing. But Abraham trusted that God knew what he was doing and he would take care of him. Also, chapter 15, beginning with verse 1, says, After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then Abram said, Look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside and said, Look now toward heaven and count the stars. If you are able to number them, he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him for righteousness. So Abraham is, he's talking with God. He says, how am I going to keep my lineage going? He says, I don't have an heir of my own house. God says, I'm going to give you an heir born in your own house. So we know, we don't know exactly at this point how old Abraham was, but he was between 75 and we'll say about 85. So this sounds crazy to him. His wife's barren. He's way too old, he thinks, to have a child. So he doesn't know what's going on. But he trusts God. Verse 6, he believed in God, and it was credited to him for righteousness. So he trusted and believed God would hold true on his promise. Somehow, some way, he was going to have an heir come out of his own household. So about 10 years goes by. There's still no heir has been born. They start to get a little worried, I guess, wanting to know, trying to figure out. So Sarah comes up with a plan to let Abram sleep with her handmaid and have a son born. And we see that happen. And Abraham, I believe he was 85 or 6 at this time. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, this results in Ishmael being born. But this is not what God had in mind. God let it happen, but this is not the way God had intended. So about 13 or 14 years goes by from Ishmael. Finally, Isaac was born. And we see how that plays out. We'll look at that a little bit more in a minute. But I think sometimes we're, as humans, we're impatient. I don't have a lot of patience. I don't like to wait around on anything. But that's just the way we are now. I mean, that's just the way we've grown up. We want everything right now. So waiting 25 years for this promised son, I mean, that would seem like an eternity. But Abraham waits it out, and finally he gets what he was promised. But we want to plan out everything, just how it's supposed to happen. We want to know where we're going, when we're going, what time we got to be there. And very rarely does it go as planned. I mean, sometimes it does, but not most of the time it doesn't, especially if you have kids. But anyway, God is in control, and we always need to be on His terms and not ours. So we'll flip over to chapter 22, beginning with verse 1. We'll see Abraham obeyed God. It says, "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'Take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you.' So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, 'Stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you.'" I think sometimes we overlook how Abraham knew God was going to pull him through this situation. Sure, I know it would have been tough. I couldn't imagine, having to do that or having to be put in that situation. But Abraham knew, he trusted God. We've seen this all the way up until now. He knew that God was going to take care of him in the back of his mind, I think. But yeah, still, I'm sure he was probably shaken. But back in chapter 12 again, verse 1, God promised him there that He was going to make him a great nation. So Abraham knows somehow that God is going to extend his family lineage somehow to make it into a great nation. But back in chapter 21, verse 8, we see that he knows that it's not going to be through Ishmael. As he tells, verse 8. "So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Therefore she said to Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. And the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But God said to Abraham, Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. So we see here, he is going to make a nation out of Ishmael, but it's not going to be the one that he has promised him all this time. So he knows, just based on chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, he knows that God has promised him a nation and he's going to pull him through. Also, in chapter 22, verse 5, we just read, is notice what he says there at the end. He says, Stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. The only we in this situation is Abraham and Isaac. So he knows they're both coming back from this sacrifice that they're about to go to. So he knows, he was confident that God was going to take care of him, and he uses we here plurally, meaning he and Isaac. So he knows he's going to pull him through. The last point, Abraham died a faithful man. We'll skip over to chapter 25, beginning with verse 7. It says, This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 175. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt at Beer Lahai Roi. So Abraham died faithful, and that's our goal as Christians. We're striving. That's what we should be striving for, is to die faithful, or either stay faithful until Jesus comes, one of the two. But that's the only way we can reach our reward. We remember Revelation chapter 2, verse 9 and 10, paraphrasing, says, Do not fear what you will suffer. Be faithful, and I will give you a crown of life. John 14, verse 6, we see that the only way to God is through Jesus Christ. And then 1 John chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, we see the victory that has overcome the world is our faith. So our faith is very important, and we can learn a lot from Abraham's faith. What's the schedule, or what are we doing? I'm sorry. Are they coming back out, or they're coming back out? Okay. Just see what I need to do here. To wrap it up a little bit, I guess, just a few verses. Abraham's mentioned some 75 times throughout the New Testament. Romans chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, we see Abraham believed God, it was counted to him as righteousness. James chapter 2, verse 21 through 23, Abraham was called a friend of God. That's what we should be striving for. We should want to be called a friend of God. Skip over to Hebrews chapter 11, sorry. Our text, I guess, for this summer series. Hebrews chapter 11, we see this is the hall of faith. Now, Abraham gets almost a third of this chapter dedicated to him. Beginning with verse 8, it said, we see, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. So that's what we should be looking forward to. We should be looking forward to heaven. Jesus has gone there to prepare it for us, as we see in John as well. Galatians chapter 3, verses 7 and 9, we see that through Abraham all the nations will be blessed. Acts chapter 7, Stephen speaking of Abraham here, his all the offspring will be blessed because of Abraham's faith. So, anyway, I don't know what time they're coming back out, but I thought it was at 35, is that right, or somewhere? I'm going to stop there, and we'll finish up here in just a few minutes. Thank you.
If you'd like to mark your songbooks, the invitation song is number 103. 103. First, let's sing number 153. Sweetly, Lord, have we heard thee calling.